Hello folks, my name is Marco Landry and today I'm going to be replacing my steering damper. I'm going to be replacing my GPR steering damper on my Yamaha R3 with an Öhlins steering damper. So this is the SD001 steering damper, and it has I guess 68 millimeter of travel. So this is the model that is recommended for the R3. And in order to mount this on my bike, I'm also going to use the Grave Motorsports steering damper mount. So this is something that will help me mount this without any drilling. It's going to attach to one of the forks. It will attach the steering mount, and then it will hold everything in place. So if that's something of interest, stay right there. I'll reposition the camera and we'll get started right now. So welcome back, guys. I just wanted to cover a few things before we get started. So the unit itself, I haven't opened it yet, but they are super sexy normally. So it comes with the decals, some mounting instructions, and the work of art of Öhlins is super well packaged in here. So this is the unit itself. You can see there's some adjustability here as well. You can adjust the amount of dampening that this will provide, and there is a little clamp to hold it in place and mount it properly. This is the Öhlins unit, and in addition to this, I also have the Grave Motorsport steering damper mount, and this is for the 2015 to 2018. So this is the clip or the clamp or the cuff, whatever you want to call it, that will mount on the on your forks, and this is the little bracket that will hold the damper over the steering mount. It also comes, I forgot about this, but it also comes with a steering stopper. It will limit the amount of sweep that you have with your bike, so it will basically stop the sweep between those two little teeth, so it will prevent this long sweep from left to right or right to left. I already have this, so I'm not going to reinstall this, but obviously if you don't have it, you will need to install this before you proceed with the installation. So you have a few options on where to mount the damper itself. So you can mount it below the fairing stay or above the fairing stay. So initially I thought I was going to mount it below, but because I have a small cluster, or I have the HM-M3 dash unit, which is super tiny, I have a lot of room at the top. So I think that I would probably prefer to have the steering damper right here. So what I'm going to end up doing is that I'll install it here and see if everything goes well, and if it's working okay and the cables don't get tangled into the damper, I'll leave it here. Otherwise, I'll just reposition it below the fairing stay. So for now, I'm going to plan to mount it right here at the top. But again, depending on your setup and how many cables and the size of your cluster and what you've done to your top triple. So in my case, I've trimmed the key. There's no more ignition key here. I've cleaned up a lot of cables, so it's a lot easier for me to install this without any of that large amount of cables and stuff that is positioned here. So if you don't have any room, you might want to position it below your fairing stay. I'm gonna get ready, I'll get my tools, and then we'll start mounting everything and see how it fits. Okay, so the first step will be to remove the top triple so I can remove this clip-on. And after that, we will be able to slide the cuff or the retaining clip that came from Graves to attach the Öhlins steering damper. So the first thing you'll need is a 22 millimeter socket to remove this nut here. Okay, so the next thing we will do is to loosen up the top triple here. This is a 6mm internal X wrench, and you'll just loosen this up on both sides. And before you do this as well, and just to be on the safe side, you can always measure the distance between the top of your triple and the end of the chrome here, so that when you reinstall it, you have the same distance and that you didn't change anything by mistake. So in my case, I know that I have 1 inch from the top of the chrome here to the area flush to the top triple. So I'm going to loosen up this one as well. And you just want to loosen it up. You don't have to pull the full bolt away. And after that, you simply slide it up. You might have to wiggle it a bit. In my case, I've been very fortunate here, super easy. And now we will remove this this clip-on. So in my case here, guys, I have the Woodcraft clip-ons. So they are aftermarket clip-ons. So your setup might be slightly different. But regardless, you'll still need to remove this clip or this clip-on here, and you need to remove this in order to be able to slide the Graves mounting bracket. Alright, so when you put this away, just make sure that you don't have a crazy bend radius in your cables. Make sure that it's secured in place properly, it won't fall. And I'm just gonna grab the clip here, or the mounting bracket, and I believe that when you install this, I'll have to double check the instructions, but you want this part here. It's you might be able to sit on the camera here, but you can see there's a little area here where there's a boss. So you want this boss to stick up. So I'm just going to slide this in here. Actually, it might be a bit too tight, so I might have to loosen up this internal X bolt as well before I do so. And now it should work properly. There we go. And no need to secure this in place just yet, because we will remount everything else, and after that we will deal with this this aspect. So I'm going to reinstall my clip-on here, and I'm not going to secure it in place just yet. I'm going to put my top triple on. Same process as we did earlier. This is always a good opportunity to clean these components or these parts at the same time here. So this one was a bit messy from the GPR unit leaking. So I'm going to clean this up, make sure it's nice and clean. And now we will reinsert this back in place. Right. So now that it's in place, I'm gonna put the nut back on the top triple. And I'm just realizing that you might not be able to see this here, so I'll reposition the camera in a minute here. But I just installed that nut. And I'm gonna snug up the top triple bolt on both sides here. And after that, I'll torque it to spec, and we will readjust my clip-on. Okay, so now I'm going to torque that stem nut here, and I'm going to torque this at 94 Newton meter. And now I'm going to make sure that nothing moved and I'm gonna measure the distance between the bottom or the top of the clamp and the top of my tube, which is 1 inch, which is exactly what I had before. And now I'm gonna secure these pinch bolts for the top triple. And the specs for this are 26 Newton meter. So I'll do the same thing on this side here. And I'm gonna grab my torque wrench in a minute to make sure I do this properly. Definitely don't want to over tighten these bolts. So this is a 6mm internal wrench again, or internal X I should say. And I'm gonna set this up for 26 Newton meter. All right, so this is all set. Okay, so now I'm gonna attach this clip-on back in place. And again, your bike might be slightly different if you still have your OEM clip-ons. If it is, you can always follow the shop guide to get an idea on how to do this properly. And obviously, if you have aftermarket clip-on, then you'll do the same as me, and you'll educate yourself and improvise as much as possible to make sure that you have the proper specs for torquing these bolts. Now I'm going to mount the steering mount bracket right here. And while I was looking at all of this, I changed my mind again, and I'll put the steering damper below the fairing stay. So in order to mount this, I'm gonna have to undo these two nuts and bolts, and this bracket will come here, and that will be attaching to the bracket for the steering damper. Or if you have the OEM fairing stay, you might have something that loops around here. So if you install your steering damper right here, you will have to chop off the bottom portion of your fairing stay in order for this to fit properly. So the way you're going to install this bracket is that you want the flat side to be on the inside. So you want it to be towards me here, and you want the little boss to be on the outside. And I'm not going to secure it all the way right now. I just want to make sure that everything fits okay. And if it does, then I'll remove these bolts again, and I'll put some Loctite before I complete the project. But for now, I just want to make sure that everything fits properly. Okay, so now that I have my damper and the bracket that comes with it, I'm just gonna slide this on here like this. And we have some torque specs for these little bolts here. I'm not gonna go super tight right now because I want to make sure everything fits properly before I secure everything in place. All right, so now I'm gonna assemble everything here to see how it's gonna look and how it's gonna fit, and make sure that everything is properly aligned before I secure everything in place. So I'm going to attach one side of the steering damper to the bracket, the fork bracket I should say. And that fork mount bracket is holding the top of the steering damper in place, and I'm going to use the bracket for the Öhlins damper to attach to the head mount bracket from Graves. It's actually a lot easier than what I was expecting. I thought that was going to be a bit more challenging than this to install this unit, but it turns out to be pretty easy. And hopefully I didn't jinx myself by saying that. I'm just trying to align this properly here. And what you want is to have this unit fairly even and leveled. So you have to just adjust that bracket on the side so that your damper is parallel to the horizon or to the floor. So now it looks fairly good like this. Again, I'm not trying to complete the full process now. I'm just trying to get everything snug and make sure that everything is lining up properly. And then once this is done, then we can secure everything in place properly. Okay, so now everything's in place. I haven't secured any of the bolts yet, but you can tell now that my damper is parallel to the ground, which is great. This is what you want. You want something to be straight like this, or that way. And now I want to make sure that when I turn from left to right or right to left, that the end of the damper won't hit against the little loop here. So if I go this way, it gets very close, but it's not touching. I might want to give myself some extra room here, so I'm going to loosen this up just a little bit here, and you can adjust it by pushing in and out. So now that looks good. I have a small tiny little gap, and if I go all the way to the other side, everything seems to be working just fine. Oh, so now I have to resecure this in place a bit more because it's just floating. So let's do this again here. I'm gonna push it here. And that seems to be okay. I have a small gap here. I'm gonna just secure this in place here. Not go the full torque spec, but I'm just gonna secure it so it stops moving. And now I have my little gap here. The bracket seems to be okay. So if I go to the full left side here, and when I go this way, there's still a little bit of space here, so it's not going to bottom out, which is exactly what you want. So that seems to be quite optimal right now. So here we go all the way there, and I think it moved just a little bit now. I'm just going to pull it out here, make sure there's enough clearance on the side here, and that seems to be okay. So I'm happy with this. So now I'm gonna torque these two bolts right here. Oops. And this is 8 Newton meter, so you don't need to go very tight here, just enough to make sure that nothing slips when you're turning the bars. And I'm going to put some blue Loctite on these two bolts here. So I'm going to remove this one. I'll just leave one in there just so that's a bit easier. I'm not going to put a lot of it, but just a little bit so that I have more secure connection. And I'll do the same thing for the bottom one here. Loctite again on this one too. Realign everything properly here and re-secure this in place. Got one down. Do the second one here as well. Make sure everything's nice and solid, nice and tight. Alright, so this is solid. And I'm going to make sure that it's still parallel here. So it still looks good. It looks like it's parallel still. Okay, so now I'm ready to secure everything in place. The first thing I'm going to do, everything is snug now, but I'm going to secure these, and it should be at 6 Newton meter. So not super tight, just make sure that it's not going to slip. So that's the only reason why you want to torque this one. And again, 6 Newton meter, so very little pressure. And I'm going to test that motion or the sweep one more time here, and everything is okay. So now what I want to do is I'm going to undo this bolt here, and I'm going to secure this one, this bolt here, and make sure that it's pinching the fork tube properly. And it's not super tight on this one either. I'll check the tightening specs or the torquing specs in a minute here. So I won't be able to easily secure this in place here, so I'm going to remove this other bolt as well, so I have a bit more room to work. So the torquing spec for this are 8 Newton meter. So again, not super tight because you don't want to bend your fork or your tube fork. Okay, so now we're gonna put the damper back in place. And I'm going to put some blue Loctite on these bolts as well. Put some Loctite on the second one as well, if I can find it. Here we go. So a bit of blue Loctite on this too. Right, so the clamp on the fork tube is secure. I resecure my clip-on, I resecure the pinching bolts, I resecure the stem nut, and the steering column bracket is solid. This one is tightened properly. Obviously I had my steering stopper that was installed before, so that's totally fine as well. And now if I do one last test, so when I do a full sweep from left to right, right to left, nothing is getting in the way, and it actually looks like everything is working the way it should be working. The cables are not getting in the way either, so that's beautiful. And now if I increase the pressure, it should be, actually I think this is the wrong way, so this is, oh yeah, this is full pressure now, so it's a lot more difficult to move it from side to side. So if I go down, I think they're suggesting 10 clicks, so if I go down all the way, and I'll do 10 clicks as a start. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I'll start with this tomorrow. I'm going to be at the racetrack, so I'll figure out if this is the right setting, and if I need to readjust it, obviously it's going to be easy to readjust. Alright folks, everything's been reassembled. The steering damper is working properly. The cables are not getting caught up. There's some extra room on the side here, so it's not bottoming down when I'm turning the steering from left to right, right to left. I adjusted the setting to 10, so this is what Öhlins is recommending. And after the first few sessions tomorrow, I'll be able to increase or decrease the amount of force that will be required to turn the bars. That was it for the installation process. Not super complex. You just have to make sure that nothing is getting caught up, and that when you are turning the bars that you have plenty of room. So now I'm going to put my body work back on, make sure that with the body work everything is still working as it should. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please post them below. If that video was helpful, please do me a favor and smash that like button, or even better, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, stay safe, ride safe, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.